and in doing so, manifest the true spirit of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, or the world is one family.
India is all set to culminate all the G20 processes and meetings held throughout the year by adopting a declaration stating commitment towards agreed priorities in the 18th G20 summit in New Delhi. Before we delve deeper, let's first understand what the G20 is.
The Group of 20 or G20 is an intergovernmental forum comprising of developed and developing 19 countries: Argentina, Australia, Brazil, Canada, China, France, Germany, India, Indonesia, Italy, Japan, Republic of Korea, Mexico, Russia, Saudi Arabia, South Africa, Turkey, the United Kingdom, and the United States, and the European Union.
The G20 was formed in 1999 after the Asian financial crisis as a forum for finance ministers and central bank governors to discuss global economic and financial issues. In an exclusive interview with Akashvani, G20 Sherpa Amitabh Kant explained the role of G20 in driving the global economy.
This is a very important role as the presidency of G20 because G20 countries account for almost 85% of the global GDP. They account for about 75% of the trade. They account for almost 90% of the global patents, and they account for almost 65% of the global population. So G20 countries are very, very significant. They are very important. They drive the global economy. And what is decided in G20 really shapes the future of the world. This is a very, very important presidency year because there are global conflicts right now. There is a huge amount of restructuring of the global supply chains. There is global debt, which is at an all-time high. And therefore, the challenges before the G20 are to accelerate the pace of inclusive and sustainable growth. There's a challenge of ensuring that there is climate action and that there is an adequate amount of flow of climate financing to emerging markets and developing countries. There's also the challenge of using technology to leapfrog, and how do we accelerate the pace of this technology acceleration across all countries. And also, due to COVID, a vast number of people across the world were left behind in education, health, nutrition, and therefore accelerating the pace of sustainable development goals will also be a key challenge.
India's G20 presidency came during crisis and chaos. The world is going through the after effects of a disruptive, once-in-a-century pandemic, conflicts, and economic uncertainty. The symbol of the lotus in the G20 logo is a representation of hope in these times. No matter how adverse the circumstances, the lotus still blooms. Even if the world is in a deep crisis, we can still progress and make the world a better place.
In our culture, both the goddess of knowledge and the goddess of prosperity are seated on a lotus. This is what the world needs most today: shared knowledge that helps us overcome our circumstances, and shared prosperity that reaches the last person at the last mile. And this is what the G20 logo symbolizes. It's a message, the spirit of universal brotherhood that we have been living through the mantra of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam.
In the G20 logo, the lotus flower depicts India's mythological heritage, our faith, our intellectualism, all these together. The contemplation of Advait here has been the philosophy of the unity of the living being. Through this logo and theme, India has given the message that to solve today's global conflicts and dilemmas, we must stand united. Through the G20, India is giving new energy to the global reputation of Buddha's message for freedom from war and Mahatma Gandhi's solution in resistance to violence.
This is why, in the G20 logo, the earth is placed on a lotus. The 7 petals of the lotus in the logo hold great significance. They represent the 7 continents. In music, 7 notes create perfect harmony. Similarly, India's G20 presidency aims to harmonize the world while respecting diversity.
As a member of the G20, India is actively involved in global economic governance and reshaping the global world order. Following the 3rd summit at Pittsburgh, India co-chaired the G20 Working Group on the Framework for Sustainable and Balanced Growth with Canada, which is still widely considered the heart and soul of G20 summits.
Now, when the world is mired in conflicts, jeopardizing the lives of ordinary people, India harnessed its G20 presidency to forge constructive and consensus-based solutions to a host of challenges such as reviving global growth, stronger climate action, and robust global health architecture. Promoting food and nutrition security, fast-tracking sustainable development goals, and leading the world to adopt an eco-friendly sustainable lifestyle through Life for Environment stood as major priorities under India's G20 agenda. Drawing light on key priority areas of India's presidency, Prime Minister Modi said,
प्लेनेट के सुरक्षित भविष्य के लिए ट्रस्टीशिप का भाव ही समाधान है। इसमें लाइफ यानी लाइफस्टाइल फॉर एनवायरनमेंट अभियान एक बड़ा योगदान दे सकता है। इसका उद्देश्य सस्टेनेबल लाइफस्टाइल को एक जन आंदोलन बनाना है। आज आवश्यकता है कि विकास के लाभ सर्वस्पर्शी और सर्वसमावेशी हो। हमें विकास के लाभों को ममभाव और समभाव से मानव मात्र तक पहुंचाना होगा। वैश्विक विकास महिलाओं की भागीदारी के बिना संभव नहीं है। हमें अपने G20 एजेंडा में वुमेन लेड डेवलपमेंट पर प्राथमिकता बनाए रखनी होगी। बिना शांति और सुरक्षा हमारी आने वाली पीढ़ियां आर्थिक वृद्धि या टेक्नोलॉजिकल इनोवेशन का लाभ नहीं ले पाएगी। G20 को शांति और सौहार्द के पक्ष में एक दृढ़ संदेश देना होगा। यह सभी प्राथमिकताएं भारत की G20 अध्यक्षता की थीम वन अर्थ, वन फैमिली, वन फ्यूचर में पूर्ण रूप से समाहित है।
Climate finance holds the master key to accelerating green transition and green development. India has consistently battled for climate finance in international fora as it holds developed countries historically responsible for the bulk of greenhouse gas emissions. Based on this reasoning, fast-tracking delivery of climate finance and raising the ambition for climate finance has been a high priority for India's G20 presidency.
India also discussed with G20 countries to scale up the deployment of zero and low emission power generation, including renewable energy. The G20 summit in India is expected to reinforce the target to limit the temperature increase to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Under its presidency, India is discussing with developed countries to provide financial, technological, and capacity building support from developed countries to mitigate climate change.
India established a working group on disaster risk reduction under its presidency to encourage collective work by the G20 to undertake multidisciplinary research and exchange best practices on disaster risk reduction. Speaking on its significance and achievements with Akashvani, Kamal Kishore, chair of the G20 Disaster Risk Reduction Working Group, said,
For the first time under India's presidency, we asked for setting up a new working group which is exclusively focused on disaster risk reduction issues. In doing so, we suggested 5 priorities for all G20 countries. The first one, early warning for all. The second, disaster and climate resilient infrastructure. The third, looking at financial systems for disaster risk management. Fourth, looking at building back better after disasters. And fifth, on nature-based solutions or ecosystem-based approaches to disaster risk reduction. A big success of India's G20 presidency in disaster risk management has been that all the G20 members have totally embraced and accepted these 5 priorities. Based on this, we have a work program and an outcome document which was finalized in the third and final meeting in Chennai at the end of July. And this will form a basis on which Brazil, the next presidency, and South Africa will take this work forward. So we've really laid the foundations of disaster risk reduction work within the G20 context. And this is truly a legacy of our presidency, inspired by our own Prime Minister's deep interest and concern for making progress on disaster risk management, not just in India, but globally.
Promoting energy transition for accelerating low-carbon growth is a key priority of India's ongoing renewables revolution, and it was discussed prominently on the agenda of India's G20 presidency. Setting new benchmarks and targets, India has already declared that half of its electricity will be generated from renewable sources. For India, time-bound and affordable finance and a sustainable supply of technology to developing countries are essential for the inclusive energy transition.
To advance energy transition, India supports the transformation and diversification of energy systems for accelerating and ensuring clean and affordable energy transitions. Under its G20 presidency, India seeks to promote ongoing energy transition through technology transfer and knowledge transfer. Enhancing international cooperation to promote innovation in solar and renewable technologies remained an important priority of India throughout the year.
While addressing the G20 Climate and Environment Sustainability Ministerial Meeting, Prime Minister Modi re-emphasized the need for enhanced climate action and quoted great sage Thiruvalluvar by reciting a couplet from his ancient Tamil scripture, Thirukural.
Nedu Kadalurum Tanneermai Kundum Tadin Tideli Tanananga Tagi Vidina. It means even the oceans will sink if the cloud that has drawn its waters up does not give it back in the form of rain. In India, nature and its ways have been regular source of learnings. These are found in several scriptures as well as oral traditions. We have learnt Pibanti Nadyaha Swayameva Nambha Swayam na khadanti Phalani Vruksha Nadanti Satyam Khaluvarivaha Paropkaraya Satam Vibhutaya. That is, neither rivers drink their own water, nor trees eat their own fruits. Clouds also do not consume grains produced by their water. Nature provides for us. We must also provide for nature. Protecting and caring for Mother Earth is our fundamental responsibility. Today, it has taken the shape of climate action.
With global warming wreaking its havoc around the world, the climate has literally changed. Against this backdrop of a looming climate emergency, India has pioneered a homegrown initiative for a sustainable and healthy lifestyle called LIFE, Lifestyle for the Environment, and placed it on the global agenda, including at G20.
G20 accounts for 80% of global GDP as well as 80% of global greenhouse gas emissions. In India's view, the G20 is therefore equipped to make life a global movement for a green lifestyle. Under India's presidency of G20, Mission Life has attracted enthusiastic responses from world leaders who have lauded India's initiative for blending its spiritual ideal of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam to drive green transformation.
In the wake of COVID-19, the internet emerged as our classroom, our workplace, the meeting space, and the preferred forum for exchanging ideas. The potential of accelerating digital transformation across the spectrum has been a major focus area of India's G20 presidency and diplomatic outreach. This digital transformation encompassed various facets from the digital economy to digital health and digital education. Since the beginning of India's presidency, it has been believed that India can lead the way by showcasing its digital transformation story.
Speaking to Akashvani, G20 Sherpa Amitabh Kant said that India focuses on making digital architecture inclusive so that it can become a catalyst of socio-economic transformation.
India provides a huge learning lesson because it has ensured that it builds up digital public goods. It has ensured that there's digital identification of all its population. 1.4 billion people have digital identity. It has ensured consent-based digitization, and therefore everybody gives consent. And thirdly, it has ensured fast payments. What India has demonstrated is that through open source, open architecture, it has been able to build up strong APIs. And this has led to very, very strong movement forward as far as both identification, as far as digital payments through UPI, as far as several other apps like DigiLocker, CoWIN, many other are concerned. And therefore, what India has demonstrated to the world is that you can use digitization to leapfrog. And therefore, India provides a unique opportunity through digital public goods, where the public good is the track which is owned by the government, on top of which the private sector innovates. So India is the only country in the world where PhonePe competes with Google Pay, where WhatsApp competes with Paytm. And therefore, our belief is that the trunk infrastructure must be created by the government, and on top of which we should allow private sector to innovate. What India has achieved in the last 6 to 7 years would have normally taken India about 60 to 70 years. But India has really accelerated the pace of digital transformation. This is a lesson for many other countries of the world, and we need to bring what we have done to the knowledge of the world.
As a result of India's persistent efforts, the G20 ministers dealing with the digital economy met on 19th of August 2023, after which an outcome document was published recognizing the digital public infrastructure as a set of shared digital systems that can be built to drive development, inclusion, and innovation.
Prior to India's presidency, efforts had been made to attain global consensus on DPI, but they failed. India's presidency, drawing from the country's own successful experience with the DPI framework, made it possible.
In the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic and the subsequent disruptions in supply chains following the Russia-Ukraine crisis, food insecurity has become a major global concern and figured prominently on the agenda of India's G20 presidency. As the food crisis affects both developing and developed countries, India harnessed its G20 presidency to enhance international collaboration and assistance across the North-South divide for bolstering global food security.
Under its G20 presidency, India emphasized focus on mobilizing international efforts to keep food supply chains functioning under challenging circumstances. India has shown an unflinching commitment to addressing food insecurity by ensuring accessibility and affordability of food for all those in need, especially in countries of the global south. Under its presidency, India worked heavily to repopularize nutritious and traditional food grains like millet, and for this, India organized several events to celebrate the International Year of Millets with great enthusiasm.
Prime Minister Modi vividly brought out the scale of the goods supply disruption crisis and underlined the need for reform of multilateral institutions. Emphasizing the urgent need to bring revolutionary changes, Prime Minister Modi said,
"We must all acknowledge that multilateralism is in crisis today. The architecture of global governance created after the Second World War was to serve two functions. First, to prevent future wars by balancing competing interests. Second, to foster international cooperation on issues of common interests. The experience of the last few years, financial crisis, climate change, pandemic, terrorism, and wars clearly shows that global governance has failed in both its mandates. We must also admit that the tragic consequences of this failure are being faced most of all by the developing countries. After years of progress, we are at risk today of moving back on the Sustainable Development Goals. Many developing countries are struggling with unsustainable debt while trying to ensure food and energy security for their people.
India remained committed to maintaining a strong and effective global financial safety net. Under India's presidency, G20 member countries worked to strengthen the long-term financial resilience of the international financial architecture by promoting sustainable capital flows and developing local currency capital markets.
With developing countries holding the G20 presidency till 2025, India in 2023, Brazil in 2024, and South Africa in 2025, India grabbed the moment to collectively push for and achieve significant changes in international financial institutions, highlighting the long-term benefits of India's G20 presidency and how it will serve as a guiding light for the upcoming presidency. Minister of External Affairs, Dr. S. Jaishankar said,
India today is, I would say, somewhere in a center. We have to find a solution for North-South. We have to find a solution for East-West, both of them. That is a big responsibility. And it is a responsibility by being the presidency of the G20, we have taken it upon ourselves. Our focus today is to get the world and the G20 to concentrate on the right problems. And that is why in preparation for the G20, Prime Minister actually held a summit virtually called the Voice of Global South.
With the clock ticking away for the achievement of the United Nations Sustainable Development Agenda 2030, accelerating SDGs has acquired a note of urgency. SDGs are an integral part of India's development agenda and its belief in an interconnected world as epitomized in Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, the ethos that animates India's G20 presidency.
the central thrust of India's efforts was on enhancing and diversifying financing of SDGs, especially for the least developed countries and small island developing states. India also emphasized further investments for low and middle income countries through 23 innovative financing sources and instruments, including mobilizing private investment to support the achievement of the SDGs.
Under its G20 presidency, India worked closely with advanced and emerging economies to enhance financing for SDGs through different ways, including increased domestic tax revenues, increased sovereign borrowing from international development finance institutions, and debt restructuring for heavily indebted borrowers. India also showcased some of the country's achievements at G20 meetings and focused on exchanging experiences and best practices with other countries.
Gender equality has been called the greatest human rights challenge of our time. And through its presidency, India advanced the G20's role in meeting this challenge. India's presidency was characterized by incisive leadership, decisiveness, and action-oriented initiatives. It left a lasting legacy by empowering women at all levels of society and the economy.
As we reflect on this historic journey, we are reminded that progress towards gender equality requires bold leadership and unwavering commitment. India's G20 presidency illuminated the path forward.
India's G20 presidency will be remembered as the People's Presidency. India has set a record with almost 200 meetings in over 50 destinations across the country.
Another unique feature of India's G20 presidency was connecting with youth by fostering dialogues on various international issues. India launched the G20 University Connect program to familiarize students with the major priorities of its G20 presidency. This initiative received an overwhelming response that led to the involvement of youth in the G20 process as the brand ambassadors for India's G20.
Now, when the world looks with hope towards India's G20 presidency, it also marks the beginning of Amrit Kal, the 25-year period beginning from the 75th anniversary of India's independence, leading up to the centenary of its independence towards a developed and inclusive society.
You were listening to a special program, India's G20 Leadership, Forging a Sustainable Path for a Resilient World. This program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of Akashvani. You can listen to it on our mobile app, News on AIR. This program is also available on our YouTube channel, News on AIR Official. You may share your feedback about this program through email at airnsttalks@gmail.com or WhatsApp on 9289 0940